Can the Florida Gators flip Solomon Thomas from the Florida State Seminoles?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast. I am Brandon Olsen. Joining me is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider and the host of Locked On Seminoles. Before we talk about really both of those teams, I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And Brian, we are talking about both Florida and Florida State here for a bit because Solomon Thomas is currently committed to Florida State. Before we talk about his recruitment and flip potential, what do you think of Solomon Thomas's film and where he projects long-term?
I've seen him live a few times, and that was enough for me. The film speaks for itself as well, but one of the strongest kids you're going to see. He had a rep at the Under Armour event this year in Pass Pro now, where the kid pass rushing didn't get off the line of scrimmage. That is rare. Like, he put his hand in that kid's chest, and it was game over. So, like, he has grown man strength. And he wants to play in the interior because he likes the grind of it. More power to him. That's pretty rare. Most kids want to play tackle. He wants to play guard. And just watching his feet, how balanced he is, that's just a rare guy. A certain young man from Daytona Beach that Florida fans are familiar with, I saw him go against him last year, and he won the battle. You go against 4- and 5-star guys, and you're definitively the better player, at least on that night. That's impressive. I think he's a guy that can play early at Florida State, wherever he ends up going, because you can't teach the strength in the feet. And he really does like football. He gets into it. He's all about the lifting and all that. Not that he needs a lot of strength for his age, but he's 6'4", 310, and just built exactly how you would want an offensive guard built. This is a big-time player.
You mentioned that he can play early, and I feel like that's a thing that we've talked about a lot, where you don't want offensive linemen playing early.
True.
So I feel like saying that he plays early, or he should play early, is kind of an indicator of just how good Solomon Thomas really is. And I did want to ask also, because I just remembered this the other day, I was talking about it on the show with Kanaji Harris playing guard last year for Florida. Is that indicative to you of how good Kanaji Harris can be? Because last year was a true freshman, and we usually say, hey, we don't want true freshmen playing early. He played left guard, center, and right guard, gave up one pressure the entire season. So I do have to ask, just how impressive is that for Kanaji Harris to come in at the SEC level, play all three positions, and just give up one pressure on the entire year?
Well, I mean, the number speaks for itself. First off, he came from IMG. He was a kid that was locked in with that program for a couple of years, and he was coached really well. To move into the SEC and be that way, especially when it's an offense that, quite honestly, wasn't the greatest. They didn't have a very good offensive line, but he was pretty good. I think he's got a pretty good future, too. He's a good kid, and he's locked in on what he's trying to do. I'm not completely shocked, but one pressure, I don't know if I agree with that stat. I'd have to go back, and I have a hard time believing that, but still, anywhere in that realm, I don't care if you're a senior. That's tremendous.
Yeah, very excited for what Kanaji Harris can be, which shout out to Billy Napier for pronouncing his name so that I stopped calling him Najee. Appreciate that one. But back to Solomon Thomas. Do you think it's realistically possible for the Florida Gators to flip Solomon Thomas from Florida State?
Jacksonville has always been a UF, Florida State city. There's some Georgia fans there too, but he's visited both schools a bunch of times. He's familiar with both staffs. He's kind of playing it out. If he flipped, I think that would be the most likely landing spot. But it'll come down to the same thing we talk about on this show every time I come on. Is the staff still there? if they play well this year, anything can happen. It's not hard to sell UF. I've said that on this show about 100 times. It's not. And he's taken multiple unofficials. He's going to take an official, etc. I think they're in the hunt. Once he took multiple unofficials this spring, like set him up, I was like, okay, this isn't just a glance. He's not just showing up with some of his teammates passing through Gainesville. He has a genuine interest. Florida State's recruiting the heck out of him, and this is the kind of kid that, let's be honest, when Florida State was down for about 5 years, O-line was their trouble spot by a mile. They do remember that, I'm sure. Atkins and some of those guys that coach there, I'm sure, are doing everything they can to get Solomon to go to play for them. But if you're still taking the visits, man, you follow what the kid does, not what he says. And he keeps going to other schools. So Florida State's in jeopardy, and Gators are probably the most likely to flip it.
Yeah. I mean, Solomon Thomas has been in Gainesville last week, going to be in Gainesville this weekend.
There you go.
Both unofficials. We'll probably see an official at some point. He's also got, of course, still committed to Florida State, at least for the time being. Miami's in there. LSU is in there. Even if it isn't a flip to Florida, how difficult is it for Florida State, or how difficult will it be for Florida State to maintain the commitment of Solomon Thomas long term? Because this isn't even just, it's not October and he just committed and you just have to keep it for 2 months. You're at now 8 months. Things can get tumultuous depending on how the seasons go. For really, all 4 of these teams could have horrible seasons, if we're being honest. Like, things can go poorly quickly for all 4 of these teams, especially where 3 of them have starting quarterbacks that it's going to be their first year starting with the program. How difficult is it going to be for Florida State to maintain Solomon Thomas's commitment?
I think that it's iffy. I think that's the best way to look at it. Florida kids are fickle anyway. They're going to take visits. They're going to do everything backwards. They're going to commit and then take visits, which I've never understood, but that's the way it's been. And Solomon is one of those kids that he wants to experience the process. I've gotten to know him a little bit. He's a talker. He's a kid that'll give you some insights into his recruitment, and he's about building relationships. So between now and, say, August, it should be kind of settled, but I think he'll leave the door open for coaching change. He's not a stupid kid. He understands that guys can leave. If Atkins got a head job somewhere, he's the line guy up there at Florida State. Well, that would probably impact his recruitment. I'm just speculating. I have no idea. But those are the kinds of things that he's looking at, which is smart. So if UF staff gets fired, he's not going to UF. I mean, these are not rocket science. That's why it's still open, and he's probably taken a pretty interesting approach to it. He's a little more diplomatic than some of the other kids. But the visits over and over again tell me that he's trying to be as broad-based with it as he can be.
And we are about to talk about more of the Florida Gators 2025 targets. But first, a quick word from Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. Get this, now through April 30th, so the end of the month, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Boost subscription fees do apply. And now for some legal info, the claim is as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. A 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA is available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC is a member of the SIPC and is a registered broker-dealer. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free reviews of the podcast and on YouTube. Joining me is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. And Brian, we're moving still on the offensive side. We're on the offensive side really the entire day. But Nayshawn Montgomery is the next player to talk about. Just what do you think of Nayshawn Montgomery's game, wide receiver?
Speedy, long, lengthy, needs to add some weight. He's a kid that's a transplant from the Northeast, moved down before his junior year, I believe it was, maybe a sophomore, but he could really run. He just recently transferred to Miami Central. He was from I think it was Rhode Island or whatever, but he's a kid that you would never know that he's from up Northeast. He fits in South Florida because he's a track build. Got the long legs, high at the hip. He can catch the ball out away from his body, play through contact, make guys miss in space. I mean, this is what you think of. You think of state of Florida wide receivers coming out of high school. He fits it. Offer list is all over the place. Miami, Penn State, Florida. He's everywhere. I think he's a guy that's probably a little bit undervalued because he played at Cardinal Newman last year. It's in Palm Beach County, private school. They're good, but it's not the same as the Miami Public League. So we'll see what he's really made of this fall. But he played well at Under Armour. He played well at Future 50 last summer against top competition, elite corners. There's nothing not to like about his game. I just don't know how big he's going to get. He is pretty frail. So like a lot of kids, UF has taken a bunch of them in the last couple of years. So they're used to that. Maybe he just fits the profile they want, but he can run, man. This is a guy that can get over the top of the defense, and that's why he's got the offers.
Yeah, he fits the profile that Florida's looking for at receiver, which is fast. Like that's really all it is. He 6'1", 165 kind of makes me think of the Aiden Mizell of
100%. Very good comparison.
Very wiry and just a speed demon there. But for Nashawn Montgomery, he's from the Northeast originally, transplanted down to Florida, 2 schools in Florida. And right now he's only got 2 official visits scheduled. It's Florida and it's Penn State. I feel like usually when you see a Florida and far away school as the 2 official visits set, and it's a kid that's in the state of Florida, you should feel pretty good about it. But with Nashawn being a kid from the Northeast, the Penn State one is actually closer to home. Florida's just closer to where he's currently living. How should Florida Gators fans feel about landing Montgomery? Or how do you feel about just where this recruitment battle is going to wind up?
It's odd. I've heard different things with Miami. Like he's visited there like 5 times. I don't know if he's a take for them because they're in on so many receivers. I don't know. So that's part of it. He's not originally from Florida, and Penn State's recruiting him. Jawan Sider, who I think is the best recruiter in the country, originally from Fort Lauderdale area, coaches at Penn State. He's recruiting him. And then you got UF, who's all over him, and he's one of the leaders. He's going to take an OB there. It's a dynamic recruitment. And he'll probably take an OB to somebody else too. It could be Florida State or it could be Texas A&M, whatever. I don't know. I wouldn't put my money on anybody. I would say there's quite a ways to go with him, regardless if he pops this spring or not.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, or
I had a feeling
leading into my next question of not just Nashawn Montgomery specific, but what do you think of the importance of the spring game for recruiting players? Because Nashawn Montgomery said that he'll be back on campus for the spring game next week for the orange and blue game. Just what does that mean for recruits? Because we also saw last year Florida landed a commitment at halftime of the spring game, and it was a big thing. Unsurprisingly, that commitment did not stick. But for Florida, I mean, it was Xavier Filsaime. It was kaput. But for Florida, just what is the importance of that spring game for recruits, especially considering the past 2 years, Florida's done their spring game on a Thursday. This year, they're moving it to Saturday in the middle of the day. And if it feels like the first 2 years was like, oh, we're going to do it Thursday so that, recruits don't have to worry about which school they want to go to in state. They could just go to us. But now Florida's kind of like, we're doing Saturday. We're just going for it.
If he gets there and he likes it, it wouldn't shock me that he made a decision for the Gators. It's an easy place to sell, man. It's the Swamp. It's one of my favorite stadiums. I don't think that's very hard. They need more talent on offense, and now they have a real quarterback. Having a certain young man from Texas on the roster probably gives it a little more of an easy flow to make it go to UF. And I'm not saying there's any guarantee of it, but his personality would fit in well there at that campus. He's a nice kid, easygoing. I think there's a good chance he can land there. And like you said, if it's this spring game, it wouldn't shock me, but it wouldn't surprise me if he waited a week or two, got into May. It's one or the other probably.
And if you're a wide receiver like Nashawn Montgomery, where your game is kind of predicated on speed, getting downfield, How enticing is it to have someone like DJ Lagway at quarterback, where it's just like, he's just got a bazooka attached to his arm, and it's like, oh well, I can catch a little 65-yard pass down there. It's something I can do.
I'm sure that most kids talk about that. There are hardly ever 65-yard passes, but kids love to talk about that stuff. And DJ's arm's ridiculous. So I've seen clips from him from practices and stuff, all kinds of things. I'm sure it's a conversation piece. And DJ's recruited well for Florida. Like he talks to kids when they come to campus and stuff. That's important. You need a segue into the University of Florida. And it usually goes to the quarterback, especially for a pass catcher, obviously. I'd imagine DJ's a pretty easy guy to talk to from what little I know of him being around him. I'm sure they're going to put him with each receiver recruit. Why would you not? So I think that's going to work out pretty well for them. Whether it's Nashawn or somebody else, probably both, he's going to have a positive influence for the Gators.
Yeah, like you said, 65-yard passes are very rare, far and few between. And if 65-yard passes were common, or if they really mattered, Joe Milton would be a relevant quarterback, but he's not.
That is also true.
Just want to throw that one in there. I don't care if you could throw the ball over them in their mountains. You're not hitting any of your receivers. Just if there's any Tennessee fans watching, just know I hate you. We are about to talk about that, Gasper, to wrap up today's show. But first, we're going to get a quick word from Game Time. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Game Time. And I don't know about you, but Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, and I like to go watch Major League Baseball. I like to go watch my Mets lose every game that they've played this season. It's super fun when you go into the season and you're like, oh, we have the Brewers in Queens, and then we have the Tigers in Queens, and you still can't win a game. Really fun. That's really indicative of success there. But at least it was cheap to go watch the game. Into opening day, Freddie Peralta had a fantastic game against the New York Mets. They got one hit. They got one hit. I got to go see that. At least it was, cheap. I got to go see it last minute. I decided to go because it was rain delayed, and then the next game, and then pushed to the next day. So I decided last minute I'll go. But you can save up to 60% on buying last minute tickets for sports, comedy, theater, whatever it is with your last minute deals that we have here. They also have flash deals and zone deals. A lot of deals with Game Time. So you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. And to wrap up today's show, we're talking about running back Chad Gasper, who his recruitment's picked up a little bit in recent months. Really, he's been on campus in Gainesville a couple times now. What do you think of Chad Gasper as a football player?
His film is interesting because he's got some power behind his pads. Plays low, plays through contact. He'll spin off a guy after making a hit, but he's only had, like, for whatever it's worth, for Max Preps, he had 99 carries last year. It's not a ton, but they had his program, Jordan High School and Katy, Texas, are loaded. They got a top 100 receiver that's going to in the class of 25 with him. They had 3 kids last year that were recruits at receiver, quarterback that can play college ball. So they threw it all over the place. But at the same time, he can also catch. I mean, he's about 200 pounds. So he's a bit of an enigma because you don't know how much durability he really has, but he runs downhill with his pads. And he's 200 pounds. He fits Napier's style. And I think it's kind of a sneaky player to recruit because he's going against big-time competition. Like that area, the Houston area, a lot of talent. And he's also a kid that's played in the system for a coach that, like, they're well coached. Those guys are making a lot of money just to coach football. That's how it works there. So I'm curious to see what happens with him because he could be a guy that picks up some more steam. Because I like the film. There's just not a ton of it because of the offense he played in and the guys they had around. They had to spread it to numerous kids that are going to play college football. Arizona State and just, all over the place.
Yeah, his recruitment, it feels a little weird just with Florida, Tennessee, Kansas, Houston, and Memphis as the schools that he's listed that have kind of drawn his attention, but it's picked up in recent months with Florida and Tennessee. And even Kansas, say what you will about Kansas's football program, they got a fun offense. So
it's well coached, man. I get it. Like, I mean, they coach them up, bro. There ain't no doubt about it.
Yeah, and he's going to plan visits with multiple schools. This feels like a recruitment that we're probably going to have to just sit and wait for a while. If I'm not mistaken, like I feel like all the attention that he's getting now, committing, even if he does commit, I'm going to be like, all right, I'll take it with a grain of salt while you're still getting attention from Power 4 programs.
I think that's a fair statement. He's a really good player, but I don't know if he knows how many more big offers he's going to get. If the Tennessee and UF offers are committable, I mean, those are pretty big. And it's, maybe he gets some more. Like, we're going into the evaluation period, late April. He might get some more. So this recruitment could go on and be a little bit of a different deal, because all the coaches that go through the Houston area are going to go through the Katy High School, Katy Jordan, et cetera. They're going to all go through that area. He's going to get some more. I'm curious to see what his OV list ends up being, especially now that it's unlimited, which, by the way, is a terrible rule. That's a kid that could end up making a decision now, then he gets an offer from, University of Texas in September or something, and then he changes his mind. So really unique because of where he's from and the players he has around him. I'm curious to see how it pulls out.
Just out of curiosity, if you know the answer to this, how often is it that a kid gets an offer from a big school and other schools are now like, oh, we have to check him out? Like how often is it where Florida offers a running back or Tennessee offers a running back before there's really a ton of SEC hype around him, and then other SEC schools are just like, well, if they think he can play at this level, let's take a little look at him?
Common. These people all know each other. I was at a practice the other day, an SEC practice, talking to one of the coaches afterwards just for a second about recruiting. And we were looking around, there were a couple guys on the field from an area that one of the staff members they had there, that's where he was originally from. Everything's interconnected. So he used to talk when he was at high schools, talk to everybody, but now he's at a particular school. Well, they're all going to call him and say, well, why'd you, they all talk. And then once you get a little information, you call that school and well, why did Alabama offer? Why did Texas offer? That happens a lot. If you look back when Kirby first took over the Georgia job, if Nick offered a guy, within 48 hours, there's a really good chance Kirby offered it. Is that a coincidence? Yeah. Florida State, that's been going on for over 30 years. It's a lot of schools don't like to be the first one to offer. They want somebody else to jump in. I don't know why. That's been that way forever. You'll see it in the state of Florida a lot with the big three. If Miami offers a kid, UF or Florida State's probably going to offer him too. It's weird.
They don't want to be the first offer just because they're like, let's make sure someone else is actually interested in him and that we're not being idiots with this one. I get it. I get it. It's a coward move, but I get it. With someone like Chad Gasper, how do you view him because I know that, Florida's going to rotate their running backs. There's going to be multiple guys every year. That's what Billy Napier does. How do you view Chad Gasper, someone that fits in with pairing with Waltez Clark for the 2025 class, as well as fitting in with a committee with Waltez Clark, Katie Daniels, and Jaden Ball?
I think that Clark is the one that's the outlier of him because he's a longer kid. The other three have similar builds. You and I are really high on the kids they got last year. They got two really good running backs, but at the same time, they're not that long guys. So Clark is the one pure outlier. This kid has some power now. He can pop the pads. I just need to see it with more volume this next season, but they're fine. They're looking for a guy that's a one cut, get up the field, and I'm going to smash you guy. He is kind of like old school Washington Redskins, 1980s. I'm not saying he's John Riggins, but it's that mentality. We're just going to be more physical than you. And Napier's talked about that a lot, and I appreciate it. You can run play action off of that. That offense has never changed. There's nothing wrong with it. It is still used to this day. And even the Chiefs, the Bills, the Rams, everybody uses it in some combination. It's easier, obviously, at the pro level when you have a gazillion hours to practice. But at the same time, some of the stuff Florida does is based off of what McVay does and some of that. And it's gap scheme. He's going to be fine either way, whether it's zone or gap, because he keeps his pad square up to the line of scrimmage, and that fits in with what UF is doing. That kind of fits the other guys too. They're just looking for depth, though. The running back position gets beat up so much, man. You know the deal. If you don't have at least one running back in every class, you're probably going to end up being short at the end of the year at some point. You're going to have a couple of guys banged up, shoulder, an ankle, whatever it is. It's just part of that position. It's the shortest shelf life, I think, in the NFL at the position players, or it's depending on the year, but it's always towards the top as far as injuries. And that's why you got to take at least one in every class. He's a guy that I think physically can take some of that pounding a little bit more naturally. And he's going to be 210 or more by the time he leaves college.
Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. This is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider and the host of Locked On Seminoles. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country and NFL 33. And I will see you all next time.